I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. My body froze. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't locked it, but I was sure I had shut it before going to bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to believe it was just the air current, the way old doors sometimes shift on their hinges. But then I heard it, the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps on the wooden floor. At first, I told myself it was my imagination. Sleep paralysis, maybe? A trick of the half-dreaming mind? I had read about such things. But the footsteps didn't stop, and they were getting closer. My skin prickled. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I counted to 3 before forcing myself to move, flicking on my bedside lamp. The room flooded with warm light. Empty. The door was slightly ajar, just as I had feared. But there was no one there. I let out a shaky breath and swung my legs over the bed, padding to the door to shut it tight this time. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly after all. But then, I noticed something strange. The floor just outside my room, the old wooden panels that always creaked under pressure, were strangely silent when I stepped onto them. I tested my weight, shifting back and forth. Still no sound. A chill ran through me as I thought back to the footsteps I'd heard only moments ago. I should have heard them moving away, fading into the hallway. But I hadn't. I barely slept that night. The next few days, the strange occurrences continued. Small things at first. Lights flickering when I entered a room. My phone screen lighting up with no notifications. Objects slightly out of place, like my keys appearing on the kitchen counter when I was sure I'd left them by the door. My mind worked overtime, trying to rationalize everything. Stress, I told myself. Fatigue, the side effects of overthinking. Then the whispers started. At night, just as I was about to drift off, I would hear faint voices like distant echoes carried on the wind. Sometimes they came from the hallway, other times from the foot of my bed. I strained to make out the words, but they were just out of reach, slipping into the air like smoke. It wasn't until I woke up one night, drenched in sweat, to find my bedroom window wide open that I finally admitted something was wrong. I lived alone. My apartment was on the 4th floor. There was no way anyone could have come in that way. And yet, the curtains billowed inward, and the cold night air carried something with it. A whisper. Close. Too close. Leave. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and slammed the window shut. My hands were shaking. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. As the days went by, the occurrences escalated. Shadows moved in my periphery, shifting unnaturally even when there was no source of light to cast them. My reflection in the mirror lagged half a second behind my movements. The whispers became more distinct, more insistent. I started catching glimpses of something in the corners of my vision, dark shapes that vanished when I turned to look at them directly. My nights became sleepless. The temperature in my apartment dropped inexplicably, making the air heavy and frigid. The feeling of being watched became constant, gnawing at my nerves until I could barely function. I started avoiding mirrors, convinced that my reflection wasn't always behaving as it should. Then, I made a mistake. One evening, desperate to reclaim my sanity, I set up my phone to record overnight. I wanted proof, evidence that it was all in my head, that I was just sleepwalking or imagining things. The next morning, I hesitated before playing back the footage. The screen showed my empty bedroom, bathed in pale moonlight. Hours passed in silence, nothing but the occasional toss and turn of my sleeping form. Then, at exactly 3:14 a.m., the door creaked open on its own. My sleeping self remained still, unaware. But something stepped into the room. A figure, shadowy, tall, its limbs unnaturally elongated. It stood there for several minutes, watching. Then it did something that made my stomach lurch. It leaned down, impossibly low, and whispered something into my sleeping ear. I couldn't hear what it said, but my sleeping self reacted. My body tensed, my breathing hitched, and then slowly, I turned my head toward it, eyes still closed. I stopped the video. My hands were numb. My whole body felt frozen. I had no memory of this, no recollection of feeling anything near me that night. But the evidence was right there, undeniable. I needed to leave. Packing was frantic, my fingers barely working as I shoved clothes into a suitcase. I kept glancing at the doorway, half expecting to see something standing there, watching. I didn't even care where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. But as I reached for the front door, I hesitated. The air shifted, the lights flickered, and then a whisper directly behind me. "You can't leave." I turned, heart in my throat, but there was no one there. Just my reflection in the hallway mirror, smiling back at me. And I wasn't smiling. My vision blurred, and I stumbled backward. My reflection did not move with me. It remained perfectly still, grinning, tilting its head slightly, as if it were considering something. Then it reached forward. I felt something cold press against my chest, a force, an invisible grip that yanked me forward. I fought, clawing at the air, but the world stretched, twisted. A deafening silence swallowed everything as I was pulled through the mirror. I landed hard, gasping. But when I looked up, I was no longer in my apartment. The world around me was gray, distorted, an endless void of glassy reflections. I turned and saw my mirror image, standing where I had been, stretching its fingers experimentally. It smiled at me one last time before walking away, disappearing into the world I had once known. I screamed, but no sound came. Then the whispers began again, this time all around me, filling the endless void with voices. And I knew I wasn't alone. Thank you for reading Whispers from the Mirror, Trapped in a Reflection's Grasp. I hope this story brought chills and captivated your imagination. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to No Sleep Tales on YouTube for more spine-tingling narratives. Share your thoughts and let me know what themes or elements you'd like to see in future stories.